So Korea, the USA, and COVID-19. What did each country do right? What did each country screw up? If you want to know, let's go. Hello, amigos, and welcome to Teach Right Travel, or welcome back. If you're not too busy with your index finger, like and subscribe so that I can keep giving you the lowdown on life as an international teacher here in Korea. So, COVID-19. To get the full picture, we need to rewind. Back to the start of the pandemic. How did it start in Korea? Korea's first case was January 20th of 2020. It seemed relatively contained until February 18th when the infamous patient 31 infected a number of people in her secretive church in Daegu. The daily cases went from 27 to almost 1,000 in 10 days. It looked like Korea was ready to explode with the coronavirus. The US started with about 20 to 30,000 cases a day until they went up to 80,000 in July, went down to 50,000 cases a day in October, and then increased exponentially to 300,000 a day in January of 2021. To be clear, that is 50 times higher than the highest daily rate in Korea. What did Korea do that the US didn't? To start off, Korea tested like crazy. By March 1st of 2020, the US had only tested 60,000 people, while Korea had tested 316,000, which would be the equivalent of almost 2 million people in the US. Eventually, Korea had 600 testing centers which were capable of 110,000 tests per day. Another way that Korea outperformed the US in handling COVID was contact tracing, which barely happened at all in the US. So how did Korea do it? Let's go back to patient 31 in Daegu. The Korean government tracked down anyone who came in contact with her, tested them, and then quarantined them for 14 days, even if they tested negative. When someone did test positive, all of their contacts from the last several days would be tracked down. From this one lady, patient 31, Korea ended up testing 9,000 people and quarantining all of them for 2 weeks. And Korea kept following this model. When any person tested positive for COVID, they would have to hand over their phone to the authorities, who would then track every place this person had been during the time they might have spread COVID. Then the government would contact every single one of those people and tell them they needed to get tested. If any of them tested positive, the process would be repeated. If they tested negative, they still had to stay in their house for 2 weeks. It's cool, bro. I get to sneak out for lunch. Sorry, Chad. When we got tested, we had to install an app on our phones that could track where we went in real time. No problem, bro. Just turn off your phone and walk out. Nope. People from the government would often call, sometimes more than once a day. If you didn't answer, someone would check in on you, sometimes in person. Okay, fine. So I'll wait until the government calls me, leave my phone at home, and then go get coffee. Okay, Chad. Did you pay with a credit card? Did you pass a camera in the subway station? Well, the government could track you that way too. It might seem drastic to a lot of Westerners, but by mid-March of 2020, things were under control in Korea, and they basically stayed that way. Oh, and how about these mask things? In Korea, you couldn't be on a train, on a bus, or frankly anywhere without a mask without being fined. Juxtapose this with the mask situation in the US. People wearing masks were called sheeple or faced other examples of verbal harassment. In Flint, Michigan, in March of 2020, a security guard at a dollar store told a customer to put a mask on her daughter, which was the state law. He was later shot in the head, and those same customers were charged with his murder. A year after that, in April of 2021, Tucker Carlson on Fox News told his viewers to confront anyone wearing a mask. Here were Tucker's exact words in April of 2021.
So the next time you see someone in a mask on the sidewalk or on the bike path, do not hesitate. Ask politely but firmly, would you please take off your mask? Science shows there is no reason for you to be wearing it. Your mask is making me uncomfortable.
Tucker Carlson said to call 911 if his viewers saw a child wearing a mask, since it was child abuse, and they were morally obligated to do something. So how did these two developed modern countries have such different approaches? Lots of different reasons, but perhaps no reason was bigger than the leaders of both countries. President Moon lived in a dorm away from his family so that he could manage the crisis, and he's done this ever since the crisis began. He sees his family every once in a while on Sundays. Our guy, on the other hand, played golf 47 times in 2020, but he did make the occasional stop to let his voice be heard. It's gonna disappear one day. It's like a miracle. It will disappear. I don't take any responsibility at all. The CDC is advising the use of a cloth face covering. I don't think I'm going to be doing it. So supposing we hit the body with a tremendous, whether it's an ultraviolet or just very powerful light. And then I said, supposing you brought the light inside of the body, which you can do either through the skin or in some other way. So it'd be interesting to check that. Getting great reviews finally for how well we are handling the pandemic. If you look, the numbers are very minuscule compared to what it was. It's dying out. I love Goya foods. The China plague will fade. Many more people would have died from the China virus if Sleepy Joe Biden were your president. Leaving now for Florida rally, big crowds. Huge. Even without the vaccine, the pandemic's gonna end. It's gonna run its course. It's gonna end. Sounds like the US screwed up at every point and Korea made every decision correctly. Close, but not quite. Let's talk about vaccines. After these comparisons between Korea and the US, you probably expect to hear that Korea created their own vaccine and the country is already at herd immunity. Not so much. Korea tried to make a vaccine, but it didn't work out. Across the Pacific in the US, though, Moderna, Pfizer, and Johnson & Johnson all developed excellent vaccines months faster than expected. Finally, a source of pride for people in the US. By mid-May of 2021, 120 million people were fully vaccinated, which is 30% of the US population. 50% of the US population had received at least one dose. But of course, we had to screw that up. On April 1st of 2021, 4,300,000 people received a vaccination shot in the US. On May 12th, that number was only 1,200,000, which is 28% of what it had been just a few weeks before. Why did the rates drop so badly? Might have been the Johnson & Johnson scare, but nobody knows for sure. The US still needs double the number of fully vaccinated people to reach herd immunity. Don't fumble the ball before the end zone, America. However, Korea also screwed up their vaccinations. While the US has 36% fully vaccinated, Korea only has 1.6% fully vaccinated by mid-May of 2021. And while the US has 50% partly vaccinated, the number in Korea is somehow just 7%. And 500,000 of those shots in Korea were administered with faulty syringes, which were marked incorrectly, and these patients were injected with unknown contaminants. And there is one more flaw with the Korean approach. In March of 2021, Gyeonggi-do, which is the area all around Seoul with a population of 13 million, required all foreigners to get tested for COVID. Seoul required the same. To be clear, only foreigners in these regions had to get tested. There were some outbreaks in a factory with foreigners working and living in crowded conditions, so the response of the health authorities was to make all foreigners, whether they lived anywhere near the factory or not, get tested. If any of these foreigners had Korean spouses, the Korean spouses did not have to get tested. If the foreigners worked at a school with hundreds of Korean staff and students, only the foreigners needed to get tested. As you can imagine, this was met with criticism. Professor Lee of Hallyu University Medical Center said, "In this pandemic situation, how are foreigners different from Koreans? They have been in our country for many years. This is a matter even of violating human rights." However, Korea was once again not to be outdone by the USA in terms of discrimination. There were over 6,600 hate crimes against Asians and Asian Americans through mid-May of 2021 in the US, with 13% being physical assaults. This includes an Atlanta area shooting spree that killed 6 Asian women, which the sheriff's spokesperson described by saying, "Yesterday was a really bad day for him." To be clear, the sheriff's spokesperson was talking about the shooter having a bad day. Trump certainly made it much worse by calling COVID-19 the China virus and the China plague, among other terms. But many of these attacks occurred after Trump left office, and the rates are still not slowing down. I know this is a bummer of a topic, but it is about a pandemic after all. I hope you learned something from the video. I did making it. On one final note of positivity, I'd like to point out that one thing both countries, Korea and the US, have in common is the bravery of the doctors and nurses on the front lines treating patients for sicknesses that eventually infected many of them as well. Doctors and nurses, Korea, USA, truly saved us all. Thanks to everybody for watching. Now don't be mean. Like, subscribe, make a comment down below and I'll get back to you. Okay? See you next time.